Beginning of this year with excitement as Egyptians appeared to reclaim their nation, looking towards a more promising future of unity and collaborative effect to their homeland. Only weeks later, however, this idealist dream started to fade, and there was a return of attacks on an unprecedented scale against churches and Christians in Egypt. For the first time, we saw churches burned and demolished, with an army looking on and doing nothing. Christians lost their lives, while those who had promised to protect every Egyptian looked on. Since then, we have had an escalation of violence from Imbaba to Atfe to Aswan, along with terrorist bombing of a church in Alexandria earlier this year. The common denominator in all of these and every other attack from the past decades is that there has been insufficient official investigation and an absence of prosecution and convictions. This last week, however, saw a new, even more dramatic turn. A peaceful rally leaving from the Cairo suburb of Shubra and heading to Masbiro State Television Center traveled approximately 10 kilometers very peacefully and without incident. Bar some stones and rocks being hurled at them at one point. According to report from organizers, there were some 60,000 people there, men, women, children, and young and old people, complete families marching in an orderly manner. Once the march entered into Masbiro area, however, there has been a sudden escalation, with moments of the army used excessive lethal force against these peaceful demonstrators. The same army that said in January that it would not fire a single shot against an Egypt citizen and stood by and watched churches burned and Christians killed because it was not in a position to intervene. However, used live ammunition and excessive force in this situation, firing lethal shots to the chest and head, while armored troops carriers were driven directly into crowds, mowing people down and killing many. Even the premature and unsubstantiated accusation by the military were fired from amongst demonstrators, would by no means warrant this level of reaction and retaliation used in armed soldiers. While these facts speak for themselves, the following must be noted and investigated. The escalation of unrest in Egypt has been caused by numerous and until now unresolved attacks on churches and Christians, and these must be investigated, the perpetrators prosecuted, and then the situation rectified. Use of this excessive level of force by the military must be investigated by the Supreme Council of the Armed Force, bearing in mind that there has been tens of protests and demonstrations by various groups of the past months that have not met this level of reaction to date. The press conference conducted by the CAF has caused outrages and allegation that no shots were fired by the military and the armored troops carriers were not intentionally driven into demonstrators, asking people to be sympathetic to frightened soldiers, even if there was no intent. The drivers of those vehicles had indeed caused death and thus must be prosecuted. Furthermore, none of the footage that the incident shows any demonstrators carrying firearms, swords, or cocktail as allies. The irresponsible reporting by state media on the day of the Masbiro incident must be investigated. There were major infringements, including the making premature, inflammatory, and unsubstantiated claims that Christian had been firing shots at the military. Reporting and inflammatory claims had made demonstrators expressing disgust as disloyal protesters attacking the army, and publicly televising insults and profanities against Christians and Christianity. This indeed a turning point in Egyptian's contemporary history, a time in which there can be positive reform and the building of new Egypt that is cohesive and that insists a sense of citizenship, ownership and responsibility into every Egyptian, ceasing to focus on the person's religion, but more on his or her contribution and accountability to single nation state. Alternatively, this can be a point at which we merrily continue denying the reality of the presence and conflict, leaving unlawful acts unresolved and prosecuted.